Governors of the North Central region put heads together to resolve the escalating insecurity in the region. What they need is federal government support for their digital solution to insecurity, among other things. And after over 2 months of budget defense and intense sessions, the National Assembly passes the 2021 appropriation bill, but not without adding to it. We'll take a look at the devil in that detail. Hello and welcome. This is Politics Today, live on Channels Television. I'm Kayode Kikulu here in Lagos. Well, exactly 73 days ago, President Muhammadu Buhari laid the 2021 appropriation bill before the National Assembly. Incidentally, on the same day he laid the budget last year, and that's October the 8th. And now, after sessions upon sessions of budget defense with ministries, departments and agencies before the various committees, both chambers of the National Assembly, that's the Senate and the House of Representatives, have now passed the budget. What was passed today at the special plenary is a 13.588 trillion naira budget. And that's against the 13.08 trillion naira appropriation bill presented by the president. Now, I'll be honest with you. There's a lot of figures in that appropriation document, but not to worry. We'll help you through them just so you can understand what the government is planning in the coming months. So that's our big topic for tonight, the 2021 budget, or the appropriation bill, as you may. But first, an update on security, and that's talking regional security, as governors from the North Central region met earlier today in Benue State to discuss the security and economic challenges confronting the region. Well, their appeal is that the federal government urgently support the region's digital security project to stamp out herders, farmers' clashes, banditry, and kidnapping in the region. The chairman of the forum and the governor of Niger State, Abubakar Bello, who read the communique issued at the end of the meeting, which is the first of its kind, said that top on the list of the resolution is how to quickly improve on the security situation within the region and return to the farms for food production, as hunger is imminent across the country, of course, due to the escalating violent crimes. So that's the big one for the North Central region. I'll be taking a look at some of the resolutions from that meeting soonest. But there are other stories making the rounds on the political scene. So let's bring you our political roundup.
The ratio of women to men in terms of population is approximately 50-50. These were the words of the Executive Chairman, National Population Commission, Nasir Okwara, at the official presentation of the Demographic Dividend Scorecard in Abuja. The scorecard, according to the Commission, is designed to enable effective policy and socio-economic impact assessment of the nation's economy and improve the living standards of the citizens. This can be achieved through family planning, education, and harnessing entrepreneurial skills, as youth won't be totally dependent on the working class. The House of Representatives will take disciplinary measures against the leader of the PDP House of Reps caucus, Kingsley Chinda, over his utterances calling for the impeachment of the president. That's according to the House Majority Leader, Ado Doguwa, who says the statement of Mr. Chinda is not the position of the PDP caucus of the House, as he claims. He says Mr. Chinda is acting alone. The House Leader also says the President's decision not to honor the invitation of the House was due to the utterances of Mr. Chinda, calling for his impeachment, and concerns that the President will be embarrassed if he honored the invitation. The statements of the Majority Leader stem from press releases from the PDP caucus of the House of Representatives, headed by Mr. Chinda.
The leadership and the well-meaning members of the House of Representatives will be compelled to take and initiate appropriate disciplinary measures against Honorable Chinda Kingsley.
In responding to the Majority Leader, Representative Kingsley Chinda, amongst other things, questions if the Majority Leader is a spokesperson of the President or a member of the People's Democratic Party. He also questions if it's out of place for a member of Parliament to call for the impeachment of the President. The trial of a former chairman of the defunct Pension Reform Task Team, Mr. Abdulrasheed Maina, continued in Abuja, with the trial judge ordering the embattled former pension boss to open his defense. At the resumed trial, lawyer to Mr. Mena asked for an adjournment on the grounds that he is unable to proceed with his no-case submission due to his inability to access the certified true copy of the court's record of proceedings. The application for adjournment was opposed by the prosecutor, who insists that it's only a ploy to stall the trial. Justice Okonabang, after listening to both parties, foreclosed the right of Mr. Mena's counsel to present a no-case submission as he orders the defendant to open his defense on the next adjourned date of January 26th and 27th, 2021.
So let's get into our conversation tonight. The 2021 budget proposal. What's in it for you? What's in it for every Nigerian watching? And just how well is this budget of economic recovery and resilience, how well is it going to do what it seeks to achieve, going by its appellation? Well, let's take a look at the details together briefly. It's a 13.588 trillion naira budget proposal. Now, we'll just quickly do a versus what was laid before the National Assembly and what was passed. So the president laid a budget of 13.08 trillion naira. That's the total, and what came out is a 13.588 trillion naira budget or appropriation bill. So those are the areas where you have the additions. You see statutory transfers, 12 billion was added. Debt service sinking fund remained the same. You see recurrent expenditure, interestingly, 7.9 billion naira was removed, sort of. But capital expenditure, the big one, you see 521 billion naira added to that one. So we have that total. Of course, revenue, what we're planning to get is 7.89 trillion naira, which gives us the deficit of 5.7 trillion naira. Before it was 5.2 trillion naira, but with that addition, we have 5.7 trillion naira. Now, the assumptions which you'll see, exchange rate at 379 naira to a dollar, oil production at 1.86 million barrels per day, oil benchmark at $40 per barrel, GDP growth rate at 3%, but don't forget Nigeria is still in a recession, and capital expenditure is 30% of that budget, or 29.30, and recurrent expenditure 41% of that budget. Really a lot to look out in that proposal. But tonight on the program, Honorable Benjamin Kalu, the spokesperson of the House of Representatives, was a part of the appropriation process at the National Assembly, and he joins us tonight. Good evening, Honorable, and thank you for joining us on Politics Today. I know that the House has wound down activities for the year, sort of. So just before you go on that break, allow Nigerians get some clarifications. And we'll begin from that obvious change. So we saw a 13.08 trillion naira budget presented, but a 13.58 trillion naira is leaving the National Assembly. So what was it thinking behind that change?
Yeah, thank you very much. First of all, this is a good day in Nigeria. Good day in the sense that we've been able to sustain what we promised Nigerians. We promised Nigerians that the budget calendar was going to be from January to December, and we're going to sustain it over the number of years we'll be in government. You know, the benefit of getting the budget passed early, what it does to the economy, and any delay on the passage of the budget, also what it does to the economy negatively. So Nigerians are going on these holidays, having this at the back of their mind that they have the roadmap towards the economic roadmap of the nation as they are coming back in January. But for the private sector, it is healthy, and also for the public sector, it is healthy. Why? Because it helps them to do their projections and put their own plans in order. I am proud of the National Assembly that we are not just talking the talk, that we have walked the talk. For the second year in a row, we've been able to pass it back to back for January to December. Having said that, like you rightly highlighted, what was brought to us was 13.08 trillion. by the executive. As you know, it's a piece of legislation, and every legislation, when you bring a proposal, that you bring a proposal to what does not mean that it has to go back the same way you brought it. Like INEC is bringing proposal with regards to the Electoral Act, and other agencies are doing that. It's called executive proposal. If it comes to us, we have to rely on the feedback system from the constituents, who usually, through public hearing, put in their own opinion on how to adjust the laws to make sure that when it's out, it will be beneficial for the people the law is meant for. But in this case, the extra amount, which is 505 billion, which was added to it, was as a result of the request from the executive. It has nothing to do with the National Assembly. The executive wanted extra fund for the SIP, that is Special Intervention Program. You know the impact of COVID and what it did to the nation, economy. And since we know that this SIP is meant for the masses, it's meant for the people, that was why we allowed it to go in. But having said that, just like you had elected for some of the people who did not see what you presented on your screen, 4.1 trillion has been approved by the National Assembly for capital expenditure, and then we have 5.6 trillion that have been approved also for recurrent expenditure, and we have 3.3 trillion which is also for debt services, and we have 496 billion which is for statutory transfer. This is what this budget has captured. And like you said, yes, $40 per barrel is still the benchmark that we are relying on. And every other projection remain the same. It's a good thing for Nigeria, because we know, having pushed this now to the executive, the ball is now in their court to make sure that they back it up with funding. The experience of the last year showed that though we released this budget early enough, but the cash backing of the budget was not as early as expected. And that was why recently, in fact, last week, on Wednesday, we received a letter from the executive requesting that we amend the 2020 Appropriation Act to enable them extend the implementation period of the 2020 budget from what it was, which is 31st of this month, to about the end of March. And seeing that
if I may
really,
comment now,
the reality remains that the impact
Honorable
of COVID
Kalu,
affected implementation.
quite a number of issues to raise.
We had to oblige their request.
Right, pardon me, we're due for a break in less than 2 minutes, but just still on that addition, really, we'll see that statutory transfers, extra 12 billion, as it were, was added. So it was 484 billion naira, now 496 billion naira. And when we take a look at the breakdown of statutory transfers, we'll see NJC, NDDC, UBE. National Assembly also is in that statutory transfer category. So where exactly did that 12 billion naira that was added to the statutory transfers category, where did it go to in these, this list of statutory transfers?
Statutory transfer was spread across, the amount that was added to statutory transfer was spread across all the agencies that that falls under the statutory transfer bracket.
So that includes the National Assembly?
The National Assembly budget is part of it has its own budget line, budget item, which is 0.98% of the entire budget of this 13 trillion, and it didn't change.
Okay, because we see here that prior to this, 128 billion naira was budgeted to the National Assembly, just to know where that went to. But a couple of issues. You have also raised funding this budget that talks about how efficient we can be in terms of spending, because clearly our revenues are dwindling because of the price of crude oil. Some of these issues will raise, but we need to go on a break, Honorable Kalu. And when we return, we'll continue the conversation. So please join us again. Welcome back to the program. Let's rejoin Honorable Benjamin Kalu, who's a spokesperson of the House of Representatives. He's been giving us a backstory into this whole budgetary or appropriation process at the National Assembly. Well, thank you for your patience, Honorable. So we're going to talk about how to fund this budget, if it eventually assented by the executive. And just to put this in context, we try to compare the 2021 budget with the 2021, or rather the 2020 budget with the 2021 appropriation bill. And you see that in 2020 we had a 10.8 trillion naira budget, but for this year, of course, 13.588, approximately 13.59 trillion naira. But what is quite interesting is that for every item, literally, we've seen a rise from statutory transfer to debt servicing to recurrent expenditure, capital expenditure. We've seen a rise. But what is quite also shocking is the fact that for our revenue, we've seen a drop. We're seeing a drop for our revenue generation. So help Nigerians understand the thinking behind funding this budget such that we don't get ourselves into a quagmire, because that's something that usually comes up, funding this huge budget.
Definitely, it is the intention of this government. I don't speak for the executive, but we have found out from their policies that it is the intention of this government to make sure that revenue leakages are blocked. And it is also the intention of the Ninth Assembly to ensure that through legislative intervention that we block certain revenue leakages that has been existing before now, to enable the projection made by the administration towards raising revenue to fund the budget achievable. But beyond that, all over the world, because of the pandemic, because of what happened to our major revenue source, which is oil and gas, every other country that falls under the same bracket has issues with revenue expectation. But having said that, we were very conservative in benchmarking the budget on $40 per barrel. Very achievable. Now, what is left that need to be used for the funding of the budget, there is nothing wrong in assessing fund loans to be able to bridge the gaps that exist where our revenue cannot cover up. Because there's no other way to go about that. In every nation borrows. It's just to make sure that what we are channeling our efforts to resolve, the effort we are making in making sure that the dividends of democracy gets to the people, that the money that is being borrowed is channeled towards those areas. As long as that is achieved, the National Assembly, the Parliament, they are happy with looking for other sources to make sure that the objective of this budget is achieved.
Well,
because at the end of the day, the political objective of the 2021 budget is to make sure that the recovery of our economy is achieved. And if we are very healthy, we will not be recovering. We are recovering because we have been heavily impacted by the consequences of the pandemic. And we are not the only country that is going through this kind of situation the world over.
You know, Honorable,
how do we launch back into the economic expectation, projection that we have set out to achieve.
Right.
With this
one
budget.
thing,
that is
one
what
of the
Nigerians
things,
should be looking at.
Right. And one of the things this pandemic has taught the world is how to be minimalist in some sense. I mean, we learned that a lot of things we were doing, we didn't quite need to do them, and that basically helped us to cut costs. And for a lot of Nigerians, they were looking to this 2021 budget as some sort of reset button for us. Find ways to cut the cost of governance to be as minimalist as possible. So in this whole appropriation process, did the National Assembly look for ways to cut the cost of governance, what people have called over bloated budgets? Was that part of your mission in this appropriation process?
Yes, that we were able to handle the process of passing this bill early enough does not mean that we compromise on quality. And we did not compromise on the level of diligence that was expected by Nigerians in looking at the numbers presented to us. Most of the agencies were asked to come back 2 or 3 times before they were able to impress the committee that was benchmarking their proposal for 2021 against their 2020. And one of the questions that we usually raise, and I personally raise in so many interactions that we had with these agencies was, I want to see the impact of the budget, impact of COVID on your budget analysis. What do I mean by that? Like you rightly pointed out, what COVID brought for us was innovation that's supposed to actually chase tradition away, especially traditions that have not been productive, traditions that have been very expensive, that have been costly for Nigerians, one of which is several trips made for training. I questioned severally, and the House also questioned severally, a certain amount of money allocated for training of workers overseas and locally, and we asked them to convert some of those funds into another areas of need and use technology, which to us we notice will be cheaper. Some Zoom meetings will be cheaper, even though the facilitator is sitting in America or sitting in the UK. We'll get our people trained using the technology that have been introduced by Zoom and other service providers in the telecommunication industry. So.
Right.
That is one of the ways that we encourage them to save money. But this will not be so obvious in this current budget because innovation is always being fought by tradition.
Right.
And it takes time for innovation to sink in and people will begin to appreciate the products that is being brought on board by innovation. So
Well,
by
Kalu,
the coming budget, what have been introduced, what have been debated during this budget, you will see it playing out in the budget that will be coming after now. Because some of these things we are done in the old tradition. But
pardon me, because of our time,
though we try to limit them, but I'm sure by the next budget it will sink in better.
All right. Two issues I'd like to raise with you before we wind down on the program in about 2 minutes. So please help me do this. First, if you could put a percentage to how efficient you've been able to make this budget. What percentage of efficiency were you able to achieve with this budget? Because looking at the figures, we see a rise. So people will say, why are we spending more? But in terms of efficiency, just how much of efficiency did you achieve with this appropriation process?
Efficiency on the part of the National Assembly event, if I got your question right?
Yes, in terms of spending
in scrutinizing
of the ministries,
numbers,
departments, and agencies.
Okay, efficiency of the ministries and
Yes.
no, there are gaps. To be honest, I must say that the last budget, comparatively speaking, between 2019 and 2020, the performance report of most of the MDAs in 2020, despite the COVID problem, they did well. I give it to the MDAs. They did better than they did in 2019, and though COVID did not allow them to implement, to the expected limit, which made them to ask for an extension of their implementation time, which we have done. Suffice that to say that based on the amount of fund released to them, they did manage those funds efficiently.
Well, Honorable Kalu,
on a scale of on a scale of 1 to 10, I would say they did well at about 7. I'll give them about 65–70%.
Okay. Well, Honorable
efficiency grading.
We have to wind down in about 30 seconds. But just before we began that conversation, you may have caught the talk about the House, the majority leader speaking about sanctioning one of the members of the House of Representatives for voicing an opinion regarding the impeachment of the president. So the question will be, will it be right to sanction a member for voicing his opinion in a democracy?
There are two things. The expression of a member as his own opinion, differentiated from the expression of a member being carried or being projected as if it's the position of the House. That is where we have problem. We have problem with the House being roped into the opinion of an individual member of the House who does not speak for the generality of the people. The Speaker and the leadership of the House, in their wisdom, just about 2 or 3 weeks ago, made a clear announcement to the House.
Honorable Kalu, we did agree before that question.
Jettison
that we had 30 seconds, so pardon me. I know this is an ongoing conversation, but I just wanted to get your opening thoughts. This is something we'll definitely build on in the coming days. But I would like to thank you so much, Honorable Benjamin Kalu, spokesperson of the House of Representatives. Thank you for your time on the program.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you.
Always an honor. Well, that's our show for tonight, everyone. Many thanks for watching. I'm Kayode Okikiolu. So have a great night.